Hello, my lovelies. How are you? I hope you are all safe and well. Thank you so much for joining us this summer for our Sketchbook Club online art class, where we'll be exploring the theme of metamorphosis. Many of you know me already. I'm Ellie, and I'm going to be guiding you through this first lesson today. I will also be here in the background throughout the other lessons too, offering guidance and support. I'm hoping by now that you have received your pack. If you haven't, that is absolutely fine. You'll still be able to join in today if you want to, but you might just be missing a couple of the drawing materials. If you have received your pack, I'm also hoping that you have tried to start sprouting your bean. Here's my little bean, and he is about 3 or 4 days in, and he has grown so much in the last couple of days. And the whole point of this project of metamorphosis is to tune into that rhythm of nature. For me, that's what mindfulness is about. It's being present, it's being in the moment. There is so much growth, change, transformation going on in the natural world. There's so much change going on in our actual lives, and it's going to be fascinating to record those changes after the next few months together. So thank you so much, especially to all our new students who have managed to join us from much further afield this term, for having faith in us and, you know, trusting us to take you on this journey nice and gently. So each of the videos will feature a tuning in exercise. That's what we're getting on to next. So a little starter activity, 10-15 minutes, just to become familiar with the materials. And for this, we are inviting in a sense of play, okay? A sense of discovery. It's that childlike curiosity. And I will be able to show you things I'm pretty sure that you won't know about, things like the humble or common pencil. We'll then have a 15-minute to 20-minute kind of main activity, main tutorial, and then some suggestions on how you want to, or you might want to develop further. So I'll be getting on with that tutorial very shortly, and then I'll be popping in at the end to talk to you a little bit about what comes next. So kind of how we can share and get feedback, the grow along, this little bean, this little guy, and why we are doing that this summer as well. And also the bingo sheet. So you'll have had a PowerPoint of resources. You should have downloaded those, and those will support not just the tuning exercise, but the main activity. And there will also be information on there on kind of things you can do between sessions. So each cycle is 2 weeks. You'll get a lesson today, and then there will be a gap of 2 weeks for you to complete those activities if you want to stay on track. Really though, essentially, you've got 3 months to complete this project. So we like to give people time and space, because I know that even though some of us are still in lockdown, it's not easy to carve out time for art, and I like to give you the kind of best opportunity to be successful with that. So I'll be back on shortly to talk to you about what comes next, but I will see you in a minute for our first tutorial. Thank you so much. Okay, my friends, let's get growing. We're going to start with a short tuning in exercise, and I've got all my materials ready, laid out for you. So I'm just going to talk you through them very quickly. There are a couple of bits that you definitely need. The parts that we sent you in the pack, the 3B pencil and the tortillon are the main things I'm going to be focusing on today. But it is helpful to have a rubber, okay? I'm going to assume you've got one of those at home, and I do actually have a 2B pencil as well, just to show a little bit of difference between the two. So every class we do at Surrey Art School, we start with a tuning in exercise, and this is a chance just to meet with the materials on the page. In some ways it's quite nice because it helps you to kind of get over the fear of the blank page, so to speak. I'm going to work on this side just because it's a little bit easier than my flappy page there. And I just want to talk you through just how to start working with these materials. So first of all, your 3B pencil. Now with a pencil, we tend to underestimate the different surfaces of the pencil. We're in this kind of habit of working with the end of the pencil, carving out quite heavy, quite dark lines with that pencil, and then kind of filling them in. But I want you to try and think slightly differently about the different surfaces of the pencil and the different pressures that you might use. So for example, if I work with my pencil right on the end like that, I can create a clear, crisp line. But those are not the only qualities of line or tone that you can create with your pencil. So if I take my pencil to about half mast, about halfway down, and I just very, very lightly rub it from side to side, I can create some really light, delicate marks with it, but that is also creating a value. It's kind of creating a darkness compared to the page itself. Press a little bit harder, and I'll create a slightly deeper tone. So I recommend kind of going along with your pencil to begin with, labeling it out, that's a 3B, and just having a play to see how dark you can create a tone with that pencil. My camera is going to jiggle a little bit, so apologies for that. So that's working on the end, but you'll notice that we'll also be creating kind of quite significant lines there, which is fine for certain areas. You can use line and tone to kind of denote the shape of something or the form. But occasionally we'll call for kind of much softer tone. We'll need kind of areas that are kind of smudgy and a little bit darker, but not necessarily linear. So in order to achieve that, you can either hold your pencil just a little bit further away. So right at the end, invite some looseness and some lightness. This is about looseness, but also about pressure. But again, we're getting some lines in there, but it's very, very subtle. Or try holding your pencil completely horizontal to the page. So if I hold my pencil here and I rub, I'm going to end up with really, really soft tone, but no lines. So you can try kind of side to side and you'll see the lines are kind of eliminated. We do get some grain from the page here, so that means some white coming through, which is great because that means we can see a little bit more lightness on the page. But just have a practice with that action, with holding the pencil slightly differently. I tend to hook my finger underneath like that. Don't judge me on my nail polish today. And also you can tone kind of in a circular motion as well. So if I'm kind of rotating the pencil as I use it and pushing nice and gently, can you see how that kind of soft, cloudy tone emerges? And I just want to show you the difference between that and my 2B pencil, just so you get an idea. So exactly the same pressure with my 2B pencil, and basically that 2B pencil is a little bit tighter in structure and it will not drop as much graphite onto the page. So you can see a clear difference, and perhaps you can start to understand why we sent you a 3B pencil in the post. It is actually quite important to have the right pencil for the job, and we are going to be working with soft tone or with values for this particular part of the project, and therefore we need a nice soft pencil to do that. I just want to talk to you about your tortie on your blender as well. Okay, so this is a blender. It is just a rolled up piece of paper. Okay, if you don't have one of these at home, you can actually just roll up a piece of paper and use it to smudge. Now, the premise behind this is that you've got paper here, graphite in between, and then this is made of paper too, so you end up with kind of paper sandwiches essentially. So if I just take that area that I put down of tone there with my 2B pencil and I start to rub very gently, never hold a blender on its end like this, because what will happen is this whole neck will just kind of retract inwards and you'll end up with a very short stumpy piece of paper that's not really much use. But can you see as I'm kind of rubbing side to side, first of all, this area of tone or this area of graphite is getting darker because I am blending in between those marks and pushing the graphite into the surface of the paper. But also it's softening off as well. So it's a really great way of blending without using kind of a greasy finger, basically. So have a little practice with your blender. You can also pick up that residue that's left on the end of the blender, and you can actually use that to create some mark making in its own right. Got a bit messy on my page already. So have a look. Can you see those very subtle kind of textures that are emerging there? So remember, it's a way of kind of creating very, very light tones. So if you're drawing something that's quite light, which we will be in the next part of this tutorial, then you need something which can create a really, really light tone. So you'll see on the PowerPoint that I gave you, I've made you a little worksheet. I love a worksheet. And it shows you what I'm talking about here, the values, the tonal scale. So we need to try and get a range of tones between light and our darkest tone in order to be able to show kind of fully how the light hits the object, which makes it appear more three-dimensional. So creating a little tonal scale like this with a 3B, with any other pencils you've got, is a really good reference point for then having a go at drawing. And then I've also photographed some simple objects for you, and I've transferred them into black and white so you can see the values. Okay, this tonal scale you can link it to the values on this black and white photo. So if you're not very good at identifying tone, i.e. areas of light or shadow, have a look at this. And I'll use this little sheet to inspire what I do next with you as well. So I've talked to you about doing kind of blending and smudging on a smaller scale. I want you to have a play with working on a slightly larger scale now. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually grate a little bit of graphite onto the page. So just bear with me a minute. I'm just grabbing a pair of scissors. There we go. And another word for this is laying a ground. So I was going to do it with my graphite stick. If you've got one of these at home, it's better in a way. But with my 3B pencil, if I just shave with my scissors, words escaping me today. If I just shave with my scissors, a little bit of that graphite from my pencil onto the page. Then what I'm doing is I'm creating a larger surface area of tone. This will come into its own in the next bit, so try and stay with me on this. And then I just need to grab a paper towel or a piece of paper, any will do. So here we go, a little bit of paper towel, and I'm going to rub that tone into the page, or that kind of powdered graphite, like so. So if you want to add some shading to a larger area, this is a really great way to do it. And I'll show you how to adapt this technique to what we're drawing. Now, I know that some of my regular Sketchbook Club groups will know this technique, but I want to remind you of it because it's useful for the grow along. It's useful for the observational studies that we do in the next part of this tutorial. And just in general, just reminding you of these other ways of mark making or working with pencil is useful. So you end up with a bit of residue on the actual paper towel as well. So I just want you to kind of think about your rubber as a drawing tool as well with this. So here we've put a little ground down. Here's my just kind of regular eraser. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it to lift out a little section and blow. And actually I'm going to look at that black and white image of those leaves to inform this. And I'm just pulling out some of the main lines that I can see on that leaf. So really, really effective. Often lines are not always dark. Quite often in nature, they're light. And we've kind of been misinformed or mistaught that at school, I suppose. So I just wanted you to think about how you could use your rubber to create line. Not only can you do that, but you can then come in with your pencil, again, on its side. I'll just get my 3B. And you can reshape that line. So I can darken around that line just using my pencil. But I can also push back into it. So if I wanted to create a really fine, light line, I'm better off to pull out a large section of light with my rubber, and then to reshape, kind of working from the larger space, so the larger negative space around the edge. So we can actually make that line much thinner than the other lines. If it comes out really chunky to begin with, we can reshape it. That's really what I'm trying to say here. So I can also come back and blend. And you always blend from the dark towards the light. So just have a little practice, a little play with that. And then additionally, if any of you happen to have a kneaded eraser or a kneadable eraser like this, you can use that to kind of lift out small areas as well. So this one's more for line, this one's more for texture. Don't worry if you've not got one at home, it really doesn't matter. But if you just happen to, or you fancy picking one up, you just shape it a little bit like this, and then you're just going to lift. And you can lift out little areas of texture. Also, if you find you've gone a little bit too far with this ground, you can come back and you can heal it. So you see how I've still got that graphite left on the end there? I can rub back in and I can undo some of the work I've done. So for your tuning in exercise, get all the drawing materials that you've got available to you out onto the table. Have a play with all of them. Record, yeah. So there I've done a 2B and I've had a look at the tonal scale. I'm going to record that so I know and I can remember. And this record you can come back to again and again throughout this project. So number one is have a play with your pencils. Number 2, have a go at putting a ground down and maybe working with your rubbers. Number 3, I do recommend having a go at creating a little tonal scale like this. And then once you've done that, you could have a go at a little study of one of these, or you can photograph something else simple in black and white and you can have a go at doing a drawing of it. So that's it, your tuning in exercise. Invite in some curiosity. This is about play. This is about discovery. So don't put any pressure on yourself. Things do not have to look perfect. It's just about getting used to, kind of getting familiar with the materials and the processes that we'll use in the next part of the tutorial. Okay, so welcome back. Here's the main activity that we're going to work on today. So I have just literally picked some bits and bobs which are already showing some evidence of growth. So these are just, you know, everything is kind of throwing itself into life at the moment. Everything's bursting into life. It's that time of the year where, you know, even the onions in your kitchen, or the shallots or the garlic or things like that, things that you already will have around, are kind of trying to kind of get moving and kind of regrow. So isn't that amazing for our kind of theme of metamorphosis? I'm going to pop this guy here for a minute. So I want you to think about how you can start to sketch these shapes, and then how you can start to add some tone to them so they start to come to life. So here's a little garlic clove, which I am going to draw for you now, but I'm also have photographed it, and I've popped that onto another slide of the PowerPoint for you. So do have a look at that. I've photographed it, I've transferred it to black and white so you can see the value, so you can really see where the dark and light areas are. Now, I was talking to you in the last tutorial a little bit about sketching and about pencil pressure. And it's really important when you're trying to kind of find the initial shape that you keep your marks nice and light and sketchy. So before we kind of try and draw the whole shape, I'm going to create this kind of oval shape just by sketching really, really lightly. I know this is not the correct shape, but this is roughly the edges of my garlic, okay? And then if I look at my garlic as well, I can see kind of the central line, the central axis of my garlic. It jumps out to one side, looks a bit like a heart on one side. It jumps out to the other side quite unevenly. But right through the middle, from kind of root to tip, is this axis. So I'm going to put that in because that helps me to get the kind of direction that my object is sitting in. And then once I've got that axis, I can then start to carve away at the edge. So once I've got this overall shape, then I can see that the kind of the bottom of the garlic comes down quite dramatically on one side, and I can use that negative space here to help me find that shape. So if this is my kind of center root area, I can start to kind of cut away at this now. So I can see here, as I come around, the garlic bulges out. And then as we get towards the root, there's a bit of a curve. So I'm going to start to cut away from that shape to find the true shape now. Can you see that? And then the same on the other side. Comes out quite dramatically here. And then it kind of comes in almost like a heart shape on the other side as well. So I'm just making sure that it's nice and balanced left to right. And just getting those key lines in. Don't worry about kind of sketching a lot at this stage. We're finding the edges. We're starting to get an understanding. We're doing our kind of first scan of the object. And then once I've done that, I can take away with my eraser those sketch marks and find the true outline, the true form. So start with a very simple shape, and then you can kind of nip away at that. I can even see here, can you see that the garlic kind of bulges? So I'm just going to take away that little area there so that I know that I've got that correct. Next thing is to kind of get the sharp end of your pencil and just pull out any sharp detail lines. So I can see one there, I can see some sharp lines, some frayed edges of my garlic. So I'm going to pop those in. And these you can press a little bit heavier for. When you're starting to actually define some of the shapes that you're seeing, you'll see that start to come together on the page. Any kind of core ruptures, I mean, there's not loads of them on here, it's quite smooth. The rest of that work will be done tonally, but I'm just making sure that if there's any kind of frayed little areas of skin, that I note those now, and it doesn't need to look, as I said, like your garlic immediately. So There we go. I'm just taking away my axis line so that I can now start to focus on adding some tone to this little guy. So when I'm talking about tone, I'm talking about the values of light between the darkest area, which tends to be kind of somewhere on the object. You've got a shadow as well, which you'll need to put in. And then the light source from here is coming from the window. So it's coming from behind, okay? It's coming across. And then the shadow for me is falling in front of me. So I am actually going to just take my graphite stick. You can actually, now I'll do pencil. Set my pencil, my 3B, and I'm going to put in the areas where there is some shadow. That helps actually for me to establish the tones on the object as well. So often your shadow will not be super dark. So actually this might end up looking a little bit darker than it needs to be right now, but we can adjust that as we go along. And again, either with your blender, blend into that shadow and blend away from the darkest area. So towards myself, I'm going to have to do on this one. Blend away from the darkest area and towards yourself. You may find at some point you want to come in and adjust this shadow, but it's good to get it in. It kind of sort of helps you to sort the values or the shadows that you can see on the object as well. So get it in, establish it. You can always come along with your eraser and lighten it up. There are many other things you can do with it afterwards. And like I said, always blending away from the shadow towards the lightest area. So I'm trying to push that shadow and just blend it to make it a little bit more subtle, I suppose. Yep, so that's that there. Next, we want to start to look at, we've done the core shadow and the cast shadow. We want to start to put some of the shadow that we can see, some of the darker areas on the actual garlic. Now, if I just show you this, my reference drawing, or my reference photo, you may want to start from just drawing from the from the photo which I created for you. Sorry, I've lost my words now. So you might want to start from drawing from observation, from like a flat image. That might be easier at first than drawing directly from observation. I'd like you to try both, but you can use these little value photos to help you see the light and the shadow. So I'm going to use that and my own eyes to start to pick up some of those shadow shapes and put those in, again, very lightly with the side of my pencil. We're not really doing much end of pencil work here. We're thinking about soft tones and how we can build them up. And some areas there may not be any tone, so you don't need to have a dark outline on this. Try and avoid that. Put in the shapes and the values that you can see for now. Or if you need to, take a photo, convert it to black and white. And I'm going to do something quite special with the top as well, so I'll show you that in a minute. Yeah. So we're just putting in any areas that we can really see there is some strong shadow on. This little corner here is quite dark and might even need a bit of intensifying there. And at the moment, yes, I know it looks a bit mucky, it looks a bit messy. It's not looking like the garlic, but that's okay, all right? Just be patient with it. It will slowly develop. So back to my blender now, and I'm looking to shape these shadow areas a little bit. They're actually quite pointy, some of these areas, and I can use my little blender to kind of sort of show the cracks that are appearing on the surface. Can you see that now? Starting to come together. So it's very clever, this kind of work. It is, and I know there's a lot of texture on my garlic, but I'm not worrying about that for now. I'm just going to think about the light and the shadow. I'll show you how to add those finishing touches of texture a little bit later on in this tutorial. Really lean into this, take your sweet time. I'm aware that I'm filming this in real time, but I will speed up at some points. Sometimes it's just nice to see the whole process end to end, and hey, I've got all the time and energy in the world right now to share these techniques with you. So can you see now what's developing on the surface of my garlic? Using a mixture of my own observation, but also really being observant of the shadow tones that I can see a little bit more clearly on my photograph. That technique has really helped me and an awful lot of beginners over the years. So just be really careful, mindful with your blender that you're not pressing too hard, because otherwise it will never last the project, frankly. And blend off any of the tone that you might have added to the surface. Garlic is quite tricky because it's white, yeah. Maybe a shallot, an onion, something else like that, you'll find a little bit easier. So I'm softening these together, but then I'm also pushing away into the light area. So here, it gets lighter, so I might as well push that tone into that light area. I'm also going to deal with this texture on the top of the garlic, so this little area here, which is quite crispy, I suppose. And again, I'm going to use the side of my pencil just to put in some heavier marks for that, because it is quite strong, that texture. You've always got to leave gaps in between to really think about not just the dark areas, but the light in between was really what's going to make your little drawing pop, okay? And remember, you can always go in and remove again with your rubber. So nothing is permanent, nothing is fixed. Drawing like this is a process. So what I'm doing now is I'm just blending off, softening off those harder areas of tone. And can you see how that starts to give me a sense of texture on that top area? Everything soft, everything loose at the moment. We'll crispen it up a little bit more as we get towards the end. It is really about just being resilience and perseverance, really, and kind of occasionally just stopping, looking at your object, looking back and seeing where things need intensifying. So I definitely need to go darker here. I definitely need to go darker here. I'm just going to do that. No time like the present. And I'm going to work that next layer in. And as I said to you before, if there are, areas you feel you've missed, this is a good time to go and work into them. But if we really want a good quality drawing, it's about the amount of time and attention we put into it. So you need a good 20 minutes to complete this drawing like I am doing here, okay? I'm going to put in a few finer marks with my blender as well, which I'm going to accentuate. It's things I can see, but they're so subtle that I don't want to overwork them too much. Little areas of texture that I can see. Okay, that's starting to really come together now. So now that you've established all these foundations and you've started to get a sense of the overall little piece of garlic, now we can start to work some detail in. So there may be areas where you want to go in and you want to lighten up again. Like, okay, I've gone a bit too dark. I'm not actually particularly a fan of that really heavy crisp line there that I've created in the gap of the garlic, but I'll go and work on that in a minute. And if there's any areas where you've gone a little bit too dark, this is your chance to kind of work back in and lighten them up a little bit more. So take away, drawing like this kind of tonal drawing is not just adding, it's taking away as well. It's getting the balance right between your light and your dark areas. So I'm just going to work back in and lighten that up a little bit, and then I can add some kind of crisp finishing lines to this. So say, for example, across here, I can see this lovely texture emerging, and I actually want to put in some lines to denote that. So I'm going to pop those in now, really lightly. I'm not pressing hard. I'm just planning with my drawing here. So I'm sketching. There's a very big difference between sketching and kind of intensely drawing. And this is it. This is just working with the end of your pencil. And I am going to put some crisper marks in now as well. So there we go. It's starting to come along quite nicely now. I'm using a little bit more of the end of my pencil, and I'm going to pop into these areas as well and add a little bit more sharpness, some sharper lines to this very, very soft study. It's been super soft so far. In some areas you won't need any tone at all. It's quite light, it's quite white. In fact, here I'm going to come back and I'm going to lighten that up a bit. So I've actually gone quite unrealistically light on that area. So you'll hear art teachers talking about push and pull quite a lot in art. And what they mean is, is add a bit, take a little bit away. This area is definitely a lot lighter than I had. Obviously got carried away with my blending. So I'm just not scared to go back in and lighten that up. And then here, I'm actually, rather than going to do a hard outline, I'm just going to intensify the shadow, and that will make that area pop. Yeah. So what we're looking for this first tutorial is really tuning into these pencil techniques, getting used to the materials that we've given you, I suppose, trying to avoid crisp, heavy lines until you have established a foundation of tone in your drawing, okay? So until you've put in all the light and dark areas, really avoid heavy outlines. We really don't need them anyway. And then you can use like little bits of mark making just to accentuate the work that you've already done just at the end, okay? But we don't need a heavy outline. We don't need something that's crisp and perfect. We just need to practice our skills. I'm fairly happy with this guy, but this is just the beginning, and I will come back and I will have a go at doing some other bits along the way, which I'll share with you over the next couple of weeks. And please do share your ideas, your responses too, and let me know how you get on with this, which I will call soft tonal technique, with a focus on values and learning how to blend. Okay. So the very last thing I wanted to talk to you about before I sign off for this particular session is your grow along. And I just want to talk to you about how you get set up for that. Can you see my little bean? He's looking absolutely fantastic, about maybe a week in by now, I would say. And I just wanted to talk to you about why we think it's important for you to kind of keep growing as you go. Now, unfortunately, my page has come clean, so I'm just going to actually use that to my advantage. And I'm going to put my little bean there. And obviously, I should have probably started this at the beginning, like you guys, but you have the opportunity to do what I did not. So I'm popping a little line in there. You can use one page or maybe a whole double page in your sketchbook for this, if you'd like the space. And we are very, very simply recording the bean as it goes. So my first drawing would probably just look like this, just capturing the shape. Very, very simple. And then again, there are some lovely textures on there, so I can apply some of the bits that I've been teaching you today to creating those textures. So I'm very lightly just popping in some darker tone in pencil. On the areas that I can still see. And then I'm going to use my tortilla on my blender just to accentuate those. Now the areas that I'm really darkening, when I blend them, that tone is going to get even darker. So I'm starting to establish some of those lovely patterns on the surface of my little bean. It's just really, really amazing, I think, to see kind of what Mother Nature can do. My bean's split apart, so I'm not going to pretend in this first one. I'm just going to leave it as is. And then here, where I've got some leftover tone on my pencil, there's still room there to tone this area as well, because it's not a white, it has got some tone. The green comes out as a very light kind of value or shade. So that can be bean 1, and then bean 2, you might find your bean is just splitting out. So if you create a little timeline like this, then you and maybe date it as you go along. So this could be your first one on the 25th of March, and then kind of note as you go along. You can stick to the same materials for this, or if you like to, you can show your evolution, your growth as well through the project, as in you can add in different materials as you go. But I'd love to see at least one page, maybe a double page for your grow along. You can put a title if you want to as well. And this is just a super fun thing, like not just for us adults, because it engages our sense of wonder, that childlike wonder in the world around us. And it truly has done that for me. Look how beautiful this is once all its roots start to establish, and now it's pushing out its first leaves. I will pop it back in its jar soon. I just wanted to show him to you. But it does engage that childlike kind of wonder, you know, of reminding ourselves of how kind of magical nature is, you know, that this one little bean with just a little bit of light and a little bit of water could flourish so much, even in an environment which is quite limited, even where there are some boundaries in place in terms of its growth. And that feels quite apt for us right now, doesn't it, my loves? Thank you so much. I hope that this tutorial has been helpful for you. Please do have a look at the other resources that I've produced for you as well, or that me and my tutors have produced. There is loads on the PowerPoint to help guide along, or to help guide you along and to accompany these tutorials. Thank you so much. So I hope you enjoyed our first tutorials. I promised I would pop back on here at the end and I would talk to you a little bit about what comes next. So if you've downloaded the PowerPoint, you will see that there are some instructions on how to record the anatomy of a runner bean, and there are also some instructions about the grow along. So this little guy I was talking to you about at the beginning, the reason why we're sprouting him is because we want to draw and photograph him ideally over time. And I think this is a really lovely thing to do as a group, as a collective. So as soon as your bean sprouts, you need to take a photo of it, or perhaps even before it does. And then we'd like you to make a little sketch of it. And you can use some of the techniques from the tutorial today to do that. Our lovely Jackie has also produced an extra little worksheet about the grow along, and you'll find a video on how to sprout your bean, or how to sprout other things if you're not going down the bean route. You may also have things growing in your garden already. You may have kind of vegetables, sunflowers, things like that on the go, and they can be included in the grow along too. So the bean is a concept, I suppose, and it's up to you how far you take it. But we would like you, for each cycle, each 2-week cycle, to go back and record your bean in its current state if you can. I'm just so interested to see that growth and that change over time, not only in your bean, but also in your own skills. And you will get better at this as you go along if you keep practicing in between times. The bingo sheet is an extra resource that we produce for all our classes anyway, so our regular students will be familiar with it. But what you'll see is a kind of table with a graph, and it'll say cycle 1 or lesson 1. And then there are some other kind of suggested activities that you could do in that kind of 2-week cycle that will help to kind of promote your continual growth rather than just dipping in for the tutorial and dipping out. We just know that when you do an activity, you go home, you reflect, you sleep on it, and then you sit down to do it again 2 or 3 days later, you will be better. Our skill develops over time in that way. We need to rest, we need to reflect, and then we come back. So please have a look at those. One of them is the grow along, and just asking you to sprout your bean, or sprout whatever it is you're sprouting. And then there's another one which is the anatomy of the bean, which is basically just kind of sketching out a runner bean and becoming familiar with the name of its parts. We're kind of moving through scientific botanical drawing here, so we're interested in the anatomy of the plant that we're drawing, not just what it looks like and that looking pretty. And then there is a suggestion to continue to practice and develop your pencil technique as well. Which means, I've given you a few demos and there's also some photographs on the PowerPoint that you can have a look at there. I'd like you to keep practicing your drawing with some simple materials, so just the onion, the garlic, these kind of whole shapes that are a bit less fiddly and a bit less complicated, just to get that idea of surface, of texture, of light, of shadow. So, please don't hold back on that and draw a potato if you want, or a sprouting potato, anything that you've got around the kitchen or the garden, but make sure it's a solid form for now, because it does make it so much easier to apply some of those theories that I've taught you today. So I really hope you've enjoyed your first lesson. If you'd like to connect with us further, you can do so either through Instagram at Surrey Art School, and we would absolutely love you to tag your work as you go and to keep us posted on that, and I'm happy to give you feedback through there. And then we do have the private members group. We've got about 50 people in there now, but it's only Sketchbook Club students. I want to make that really clear. Some groups can be so noisy, and that's not what I want for this group. I want it to be very, very targeted, very specific, and to be about that joy of sharing and getting feedback from other people. So if you haven't joined the Facebook group yet and you'd like to, I'd love to invite you to join us on there too. It's a really calm, friendly, warm space, and I've been loving watching people's starter pages that they've been sharing already. So you may find some inspiration there, not from me or the tutors, but from other students, which is, something which constantly inspires me too. So thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed this first lesson, and I will be popping back on just to share some reflection questions next Tuesday, and then the following Tuesday, 2 weeks later, your second lesson will be up. Okay, thank you so much. you.